Dan, I want to start with you since you're on the ground there. Part of the problem throughout this conflict has been different messaging from both within these parties and cross-talking between them. We heard the White House press secretary say they are going to have talks. Iran has said they haven't agreed to talks. Will they be talking? What's going on? What are you hearing?
Yeah, I mean, the confusion is absolutely palpable here on the ground in Islamabad as well. The Iranian foreign minister, Abbas, is indeed in Islamabad having meetings with Pakistani officials as we speak. Now, what remains to be seen is if the foreign minister will be meeting with the U.S. delegation, which, as you mentioned, is expected to arrive in Islamabad at some point this weekend. The two sides are really far apart on a lot of issues. Of course, the control of the Strait of Hormuz remains the sort of central sticking point that's holding off talks between the two sides. I think what you may end up seeing here in Islamabad is sort of, each side kind of arrives, passes messages to the Pakistanis who are acting as the intermediary in these negotiations, and then they go their separate ways and sort of continue to talk about talking, if you will. But again, much remains to be seen. It's still only Saturday here in Islamabad, so we'll see what happens.
Joshua Grove, let me go to you next. I'm curious about who's going and who's not going. So we have Secretary of State Marco Rubio, also the National Security Advisor, archivist as well, I should note, remaining here in Washington, D.C. J.D. Vance, the Vice President, not going as well. Here's what the White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt had to say about that yesterday.
The Vice President, the Secretary of State, will be waiting here in the United States for updates, and the Vice President, I understand, is on standby and will be willing to dispatch to Pakistan if we feel it's a necessary use of his time.
Josh, you're traveling with the president, and I'm curious what the administration's perspective on these talks is, how much optimism they have that this is going to lead to not only a ceasefire, but I guess before that, just a meeting itself.
Yeah, David, good morning, and thank you. Yeah, I am traveling with him. Unfortunately, I'm not on the Mar-a-Lago guest list, you can imagine, so I apologize. I look like I'm being held in a nondescript location by the Emperor of Marriott. Bear with me here. This is life in West Palm Beach.
You're getting your points, and we're happy for that, Josh.
That's right,
yes.
that's right. The White House, on the one hand, I think, is wanting to signal disinterest in these talks. If they wanted to put a foot down on them, they would have sent Vance. The fact that they're not, I think, is a signal they want to send. I don't know how material it is, though, because Witkoff and Kushner, of course, have a pretty direct, literally direct line to the president and are pretty empowered to do that. There's been some sort of frustration in American circles that they believe that their delegation is being sent and, empowered to talk and negotiate there. Of course, one of the snags that we've heard from American officials is that they think that the Iranians are not able to do that, in part out of security concerns and the undisclosed location of the supreme leader. They don't, so they think they're hitting a logjam on that. And so I think expectations are low. The fact that on the American side of some sort of immediate breakthrough, the fact that talks are happening, I suppose, are a positive. I think it's important just to remember, as we noted there, but just to emphasize it, the standoff on the Strait is sort of a chicken and egg scenario, right? Like what we have here is the Strait was closed suddenly again by Iran because of the blockade. Trump says the blockade is until they get a deal, including opening the Strait. So it's a battle of wills right now, whether that particular piece will open. And there were a lot of great pieces on the terminal in the past few days about the mounting pressures on the energy markets in particular, and how long we can sort of run on reserves until this thing really starts to cascade through the economy.
And Abir, I want to ask you about how this is being perceived in the region, because obviously we talk about the Gulf is not a monolith, and we know that. But the GCC states, recently they've been a little quieter than they were when, they were actively under fire from Iran. I don't know what you've heard, but diplomats I've spoken to in the region don't have a lot of confidence in these talks. They don't have a lot of confidence in Pakistan as a mediator. Do they think the U.S. is approaching this the right way to end this conflict anytime soon?
Yeah, good morning. So look, you're absolutely right, and Josh and Dan sort of alluded to this perfectly. First of all, the Strait of Hormuz remains the sticking point here, but I've been back in Dubai for a week now, and I've been meeting some officials and trying to understand what the perspective is or how it's changed over the past couple of weeks or so, certainly since the ceasefire was announced. And what really stood out to me was we reported earlier, about a week ago, that Gulf officials and some Western officials believe that reaching a deal between the U.S. and Iran would take about 6 months, and that was solidified to me when I arrived in Dubai. Speaking to some officials, they don't think that things are going to go back to direct firings over capital cities in the GCC, but they do think that the Iranians will take this as long as possible and not come to concessions. And I'm just seeing some Arabic media outlets reporting here on my screen. And this is, Dan is obviously there, but this is not verified reporting by Bloomberg. But some media, Arabic media reports suggest that Araghchi in Islamabad is suggesting that the Iranians would rather deal with J.D. Vance, that the Iranians are not going to come to concessions, and that they're sticking to the 10 points that they've laid out initially, essentially no compromise. And that brings into the question the double blockade that we're seeing across the Strait of Hormuz and what contingency plans those GCC countries are considering to sort of avoid that and get their oil shipments across.
Abir, I want to ask you about the state of Iran today, Iranian leadership, and something the president brings up here in the U.S. a lot is that there's a lot of fractions there. It's not a unified voice coming from Iranian leadership right now. There was a great piece in the Times this week about the supreme leader, just about his health, how he's doing, and I'll quote a bit from it. He was gravely wounded. He's mentally sharp and engaged, according to 4 senior Iranian officials familiar with his health. One leg was operated on 3 times. He's awaiting a prosthetic. He had surgery on one hand and is slowly regaining function. His face and lips have been burned severely, making it difficult for him to speak, the officials said, adding that eventually he will need plastic surgery. So confirming what we've heard from the administration here in the U.S., that he was injured in one of these attacks. What is the latest that we know about sort of who is in control, who is kind of leading the charge for the Iranians when it comes to these talks and trying to find some solution here?
Yeah, and look, I saw that piece as well, and it sort of, again, brings into light the conversation that we've had earlier. The start of this, we're about to enter the 60th day of this war, and no sign from the new Khamenei as of yet. And this article sort of explains why that is, and he remains in a hidden location. There were a lot of reports about his health and where he is, but it remains the people that remain in charge that President Trump refers to as the new people that are sort of more rational, the new regime that he refers to, are those ones that are going to Islamabad. At the forefront of those are Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, who is in Islamabad today. There are reports about him likely going to Oman next, possibly Russia as well. Those are unverified yet. Oman was obviously a key mediator before all of this started. But at the forefront, those people are the people that we keep hearing about. You've got Araghchi, you've got Kalibaf, who's also part of the delegation that is in charge of those talks in Islamabad this week, David.
Dan, you heard Abir say that people are thinking this could go on for 6 months. Are you ready to hang out in Pakistan for 6 months? And I also want to ask you, what is at stake for the Pakistanis? They've really put themselves out there. They're very proud of hosting this talks. This is, I don't want to say a first, but in recent memory, this is the first time they've been in this position. If it doesn't work and if it continues not to work, do they lose face on the diplomatic stage?
Well, to your first question, I mean, Islamabad is just absolutely overrun with journalists at the moment, sort of in this, hurry up and wait mode, just waiting to see what happens. So we'll be here as long as we're welcome. That being said, I mean, for Pakistan, you're absolutely right. I mean, so much is at stake here. This government has really positioned itself, gone out of its way to position itself as the go-between between these two warring nations. It's in a really quite unique position right now in the world of having positive relations with all sides of this conflict, essentially. Of course, President Trump and the leadership in Pakistan are quite close. Pakistan has good relations with Iran as well. Pakistan has good relations with China and a large number of the Gulf countries as well, that are all deeply involved in this conflict. So it is in a unique position. It has invited the two sides here once already, and is really sort of putting all its chips on the table and trying to bring everybody together. And Pakistan itself also has a lot to lose if this war continues. I mean, this is a country that is itself economically on the rocks. It's on an IMF program. It has fuel shortages that are being exacerbated by the blockade in the Strait of Hormuz. So it too has an interest and and a stake in ending this war. So it definitely does want things to wind up soon. Now, whether that happens in the coming days, we'll certainly wait and see.
Josh, we don't have a ton of time left, but we talked earlier about the fact that Vance and Rubio are not going. And Abir referenced this a little bit. It's the inadequacy of the players even going to these talks. You know, in diplomacy, little things really matter. And the fact that Iran's foreign minister is there, the U.S. Secretary of State is not, his equivalent is not going to these talks. How does the White House think they're going to get progress if they're not showing up kind of seriously for the debate?
I mean, Trump likes leverage. I'm sure he sees potential leverage and sort of holding back a chess piece that he can then deploy. But at the same time, Witkoff has a remarkably unusual role by comparison to past administrations. So, you know, this is
true. That's a good point.
And to say nothing of Kushner. So, you know, this is not, I suppose, in some ways all that while, you know, Secretary of State Marco Rubio has not played a huge role in these talks that has left the impression that he is somewhat, you know, removed from this. I think that that's an interesting dynamic in the palace intrigue sort of perspective. But as for the president, you know, sources have insisted that he's not bored with this, but he does not appear overly interested. On the flight down last night, he did not talk to us. He was truthing or tweeting about, you know, renovations of fountains and what they're doing to the reflecting pool in Washington, D.C. He was talking about crowds at his inauguration the day before that. I mean, he is on so many other different subjects right now. It does not feel like he's, you know, facing a ton of urgency. Meanwhile, he is starting to really feel a pinch, not only of energy prices, but of coal declines right domestically at home. So that is, speaking of leverage, what Iran thinks it has.